The quest for the best whiskey of 2024 continues. Let's dive into round 3. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that's right, we're on round 3 of our tournament bracket challenge to determine the best whiskey of 2024. If you haven't seen the first 2 rounds, what I recommend you do is stick around for this video and then at the end go back and check out what has already advanced. The way it's working is we took our top 16 whiskeys of the year, split those into 4 blind matchups among 4 different whiskeys. Each time one whiskey advances to the final 4, and that final blind matchup is going to determine our whiskey of the year for 2024. It's been a lot of fun so far. There's just so many amazing whiskeys that I'm privileged to get to taste, and that is true today as well. So let me tell you about the contenders today. First up is James E. Pepper Barrel Proof. Technically released in December of 2023, but really a 2024 release when most people could get it. An awesome value for around $65. Beautiful presentation as well. We've got Maker's Mark Cellar Aged 2024, one of the newer unicorn bottle yearly releases on the market. Definitely a heavy hitter and kind of a favorite. Then we've got another huge bottle, one of the more exclusive special bottles I've ever gotten, Four Roses limited edition for 2024. This is, I think, around 108 proof and just super complex, some really well-aged whiskey in here. And then we've got another more budget-friendly contender that I think is interesting to mix in here along with James E. Pepper. We've got the Green River Full Proof, 117 proof, only about $45 to $50, but has impressed me all throughout the year, and I'm interested to see how it does in this lineup. So now that we're introduced to the contenders, let me move them off the table, get our blind set up, and we'll dive into round 3. Without further ado, we've got our blind set up. We're going to dive in. This will be glass A on my right, your left, and we'll work our way down to glass D. At the end, we will reveal to me what I've been sipping on, but you'll see it on the screen as we go. Okay, so glass A on the nose. Fruity. It's definitely fruity. Cherry, berry notes for sure. A little spicy as well. Touch of ethanol, but also kind of a simmering spice. Vanilla. A little bit of an oak, but maybe a slightly lighter kind of oak coming through at first, at least. But I feel like the fruit nature of this is at the core. Some apple. Very interesting, and some berries. But it just sends out those fruit signals. It's going to be interesting to see how that one develops and what we get on the palate. All right, glass B on the nose. Darker. That's the first thing that comes to mind, especially coming off of glass A. Dark and rich. While glass A had some brighter fruit notes, really popped with that. This has density, oak, brown sugar, but the vanilla characteristic here is like this darker vanilla. A little bit of heat to it as well, but not too much. It feels like a cooler, denser whiskey. The berries notes are there, kind of like glass A, but more stewed down and dense and dark. Okay, so glass C, moving right along. Oh, we go back to a brighter experience. Wow, that's interesting. Almost an almond, coconutty touch to this one. That's giving it that bright flair with a little brighter vanilla. But then there's oak. Some darker elements to this one too, though. Berries. So what's really interesting as I think through the lineup is James E. Pepper, Maker's Mark, definitely Four Roses, and maybe the Green River, although I don't remember it as much. They're all more fruit forward, berry forward, interesting experiences. So it might be very difficult for me to tell any of these apart. Vanilla coming through on this now. But yeah, it's that coconut, slight coconutiness, slight flair to it that's brighter, but it shares a lot with Glass B in terms of its dark qualities. And then Glass D on the nose. All right. A little less prominent on the nose than maybe the rest of the contenders have been. Brown sugar. Maybe a honey experience here. Vanilla as well, but more muted. Some heat. This one's giving off ethanol, but also I can just anticipate a spicier profile on the palate here. Oh, okay. Touch of a cinnamon apple. Yeah, definite apple experience here. This might remind me the most of Glass A, and then Glass B and C are more akin to each other. So in terms of a front runner on the nose, I'm not sure I have a distinct one. I think the first three all give me very interesting vibes. Glass, wow, that smells good. Glass A does. But Glass D, maybe falling a little short there. Interested to see how the palate develops though. Let's go into that. That's where we're gonna get a lot more information. So Glass A on the palate. Cheers. Wow, it's delicious. I mean, to be expected, these are some of the best stuff of the year, but that vanilla strain is like vanilla ice cream. Peaches, kind of a big peach note for me. This really sweet fruit. Apple, you could call it this grapey, white grape, more like a white wine experience. And then there's a little strain of oak too. A little spice, but it's that vanilla peach thing that really hit on the sort of back end of the sip into the finish that turns this thing into something truly delicious. So very, very good start. Let's move on to Glass B on the palate. Yeah, much darker and denser. Cheers. Wow. So the dark density of it on the nose comes through on the palate. The mouthfeel, immediate, coming off Glass A. The mouth feels thicker here, more viscous. And I think that contributes to that sense of density. And I was just noting, like, as I look at the colors here, I do think Glass B has a darker tone to it. Probably some more age. Plum, dark cherry, and this oak. A little bit of a funky oak. A little bit of just a barrel presence to it. Slight tannicness, and that plum is a little acidic, but it's balanced out by some nice vanilla and brown sugar. So that one's got the berries, but it's got more density and darkness, just like the nose gave off. All right, let's dive into Glass C. By the way, I do get water between each of the sips of these, so if I'm cutting around a bit, that is why. All right. Wow, this nose is really interesting. Okay, Glass C on the palate. Okay, so tracking that mouth feel, that experience, maybe a little bit less thick than Glass B was. Similar profile though. There's vanilla, there's a grapey plum nature to this. There's a little bit of that coconut flair. But this one's a little more tame than I was maybe expecting. The nose is wonderful, continued to open up, and the palate's just a little more even keel. There's interesting notes throughout, but it didn't really spike up in flavor or spiciness. It just kind of rode even for me for a lot of the sip. Berry notes, a little bit of tobacco, oak for sure, but it doesn't have a ton of punch. It just has more of a nuanced, you gotta think as you sip it and think through the flavors. But very, very good. And then let's move right along into Glass D. Last but not least. Ooh, a little bit more of a brown sugar, maybe even like Tootsie Roll chocolate experience on the nose. Cheers. Nice. Spicy, brown sugar for sure. Honey, lots of honey. And that brown sugar is continuing on the finish. A little bit of apple, like I mentioned, kind of coming through, peeking through on the nose. That's more prominent on the palate. Almost like a cooked apple with some cinnamon on it. Really, really good honeyness at the core of that one. Delicious, but a little spicy, a little bit aggressive, and maybe the most youthful of the experiences so far. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is just go in reverse order, do some A/B testing, kind of figure out my order here. I'll fast forward through all of that for you guys so it's pretty quick, and then I'll recap and let you know my winner today. Okay, everybody, that was a journey. I really had to dig through these, give them their due diligence. I think there's a similar fruitiness on a lot of these that makes them more difficult to really pick apart, but I do have a definitive order now and excited to talk through it with you. Okay, so for round 3, in 4th place, ultimately today for me was Glass D. Now, I do want to caveat, none of these disappointed me today. Each of them was delicious in their own way. I would say about Glass D, it's very powerful. The brown sugar, honey, apple of the nose is wonderful. The palate is powerful, has most, if not all of those flavors. Just had a touch of heat and aggressiveness and maybe slight youthfulness that docked it compared to some of the others here. Let's see what in 4th place was. Okay. I think that makes sense. It's the Green River Foolproof. Here's the truth though. A $45 bottle belonged in this lineup, and that is a testament to how good this stuff is. It does have a more youthful note compared to some of the others. I mean, we're talking about 13 years, sometimes in the case of the Four Roses, got 20-year-old whiskey in there. So for this to earn its place is pretty cool. It's got this spicy honey, apple, brown sugar core that's wonderful, but again, a little more youthful than the others and maybe not as balanced. All right, so in 3rd place for me today in round 3 was Glass A. A slightly similar story. Beautiful brightness, the fruitiness, wonderful here. That peach cream power to it on the palate is great, but again, a touch more aggressive and maybe a little bit less balanced than the other two. Let's see what 3rd place was. That makes sense as well. It's the James E. Pepper Barrel Proof. Again, $65. As I've tasted this one, that peaches, that cream really comes through, some spiciness, some pepper. When I first tasted this and described it to people, I said that white grape, that white wine experience is unique, and it continues to shine as such. This one had a lot akin to the other two, and for $65, did beat out the Green River, and is just a really wonderful experience. I'm not necessarily surprised that the Maker's Mark and the Four Roses are standing above as a little bit more well-balanced and aged, which you can really taste when you go through a blind matchup. You can taste the ones that are a little more aggressive and the ones that are a little bit more well-rounded overall. That leaves us with these two. And these two went toe-to-toe. I had to really dig deep and experience both of them fully to understand what my order should be. Here's how I'd break it down. I would say that Glass C has a superior nose. Glass B has a superior palate. And so ultimately for today, the winner was glass B. Let's see how it all shook out. So our winner is Maker's Mark, which puts second place as the Four Roses limited edition. So the Maker's Mark Cellar Aged. Wonderful presentation. Let's focus on the Four Roses for a second since it's in second place today. The best nose of the bunch. I mean, I can just say that outright. That coconut, slight tropical flair, the aged notes, the oak, the vanilla, and some fruits. Beautiful. The Maker's Mark on the nose has this interesting plum darkness to it. It's a little richer, but not as pleasant, I would say. Then you get to the palate, and that's when the Maker's really shines. There's a toasted sugar nature to it that really developed overall, and mix that with the plum, with the oak, and the wheated profile that this brings. It's delicious. I will say though, the Four Roses has one of the best noses I've smelled all year. So really stood up there, but then the palate and the finish of the Maker's Cellar Aged 2024 really did kind of wow me today and was a clear winner. So almost if you took the Four Roses nose and combined it with the Maker's palate, you'd get one of the best whiskeys I've ever tasted. Each of them has like a slight flaw, but they're both very, very good. The Maker's will be moving on. I think it's a strong contender. That palate is spectacular. The toasted sugar is great. I've compared this to the 2023 Maker's Mark Cellar Aged, and I do think the palate is stronger on this one. So that really worked in its favor today. That's gonna do it, everybody. Let me know in the comments below, did this kind of unfold the way you would expect? It is not surprising to me, again, that the two more significant, well-aged, expensive, allocated whiskeys really stepped up. But these two bottles, honestly, if you go get a Green River Full Proof or a James E. Pepper Barrel Proof, it stands not super far behind something like this Four Roses or this Maker's Mark. It was noticeably a little bit lackluster compared to those two today, but when you kind of factor in the money that you have to pay and the time and the effort to get these two, these more affordable, accessible bottles really shine. So Maker's Mark Cellar Aged, moving on, gonna be in our final four. Interested to see how it stacks up. Spoiler alert, it will be facing off against Russell's Reserve 15 and Old Fitz 13-year-old. So we'll see if it can really hold up to that competition, but a very, very great palate and a wonderful finish on this bottle. Really rode it through to the victory today. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.